So for my final project, I decided to make a coded language dictionary. It's titled Maddie Wins Coded Language Dictionary, inspired by Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. I thought that was clever. But yeah, essentially I took various terms and phrases that we went over this past semester and kind of unpacked them a little bit, looked at what they're used for, who uses them, what they really mean, and some ways to combat these phrases and kind of change them to say what they're actually trying to say. So for this video, I'm just going to go through and read everything that I wrote. So I started on the first page. You can see I started by defining coded language, and I wrote that it's a noun, and it's terms or phrases used when discussing matters of race or other social influences to re-establish dominance. And then kind of in this bulky body paragraph, it's like an introduction to coded language, and I wrote that coded language is extremely prevalent in our society. Oftentimes it is so common that people do not realize that they are using coded language. Coded language is a way to reestablish dominant groups as dominant. It is a method of consistently pushing anyone who does not fall into that group away and out without being explicit about it. One particular pattern that has been evident in all of these pieces of coded language examined throughout the course has been the reshifting of blame from dominant to non-dominant groups. I go more into this later when examining specific words and phrases. Continuing on, many are mechanisms of defensiveness. When confronted with privilege, privileged groups feel the need to counter it. Privileged groups do not like feeling uncomfortable. Being confronted with power can be uncomfortable. Another pattern would be how certain phrases and terms, would be how common certain phrases and terms are. Things like neutral, normal, achievement gap, etc. As I mentioned before, coded language is so prevalent. Most people consider it to be like normal, almost academic pieces of language. And then on the next page, kind of a continued introduction, I have reflecting on my own use of coded language and where do we learn coded language. So when thinking about my own use of coded language, I say, of course, I've used coded language in my lifetime. For a long time, I didn't have a concept of something like neutrality. Like, I didn't really understand that that wasn't a real thing. I also didn't understand the issues behind phrases like achievement gap, the word normal, or the term educational reform. They'd all been so ingrained in me as things that were pretty typical to use, pretty regular. But this class has pointed out a couple of new phrases to evaluate and eliminate from my vocabulary, and now I feel much more confident in being able to pick up on coded language and combat it. And then in the second paragraph, I talk about where we learn coded language. I said, like many things, coded language is learned in various different contexts. We've got home, communities, schools. This particular dictionary focuses on terms typically heard in academic settings, because this is a class about justice-based education. I said teachers will be very blasé when using terms like normal or objective without understanding the various implications of these words and the various effects it can have on students. Whether we are aware or not, teachers do have biases, as discussed in Wayne Journal's article about teacher political disclosure. I talk about this more when dissecting the terms centrism and neutrality. And by claiming things as neutral and objective, they're pushing these different phrases as things that can be objective when really they're not. They're implying something else, or they're being used as a way to blanket offensive or oppressive thoughts. And yeah. And then moving into the last part of the introduction, I have